my pleasure to introduce Senator Julian Cyr, who's going to give us a report on his district and what we can expect from money from the state.
You bring some?
No pressure.
I didn't bring money tonight, but the House is taking up its budget right now, so they're taking up the money now, and in May I will hopefully be able to bring bags of money with me. So I'm State Senator Julian Cyr. Really glad to be here with all of you tonight. Actually, I had hoped to join my partner in crime here in Mashpee, Dave Vieira, who works on the House side, but he is actually up debating the House budget tonight. So he is in Beacon Hill working to get you that money. I know that Board Chair Andrew Gottlieb is going to be joining us late. I believe he is, I want to congratulate him on his new position. He's got a lot of work to do in his new organization. But the thought that, when I kind of came into this position, I really wanted to make sure that I did my due diligence, meeting with all the boards of selectmen. I've met with almost all of you individually. Carol, my apologies, still got to sit down with you. But really wanting to go around to introduce myself for those who don't know me, and to continue the conversation for those of you that I've worked with, to tell you a little bit about what I've been up to and what our team has been focusing on in our agenda, and then really asking how we can help. And Rodney, I've been in some meetings with you already on some issues in town, and will continue to be there. I'm really honored to be in this role as your state senator, and as a Cape guy, as someone who grew up, born and raised in Truro, I know that local partnerships with each of the 21 towns that I represent, from Provincetown to Mashpee, then Nantucket, and the 6 towns in Martha's Vineyard, that's really key. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful, great staff who helps me out. All of my staff are Cape Codders, folks who either grew up here or live here currently. So really proud of the team that we have. We've rolled up our sleeves from day one. Had a policy summit early on when we got started. We were planning to do it in our first few weeks, but we got snowed out. So we joined in. We did that in March. But really looking at how I ran in my campaign and how we're continuing to govern, is that I spent a lot of time going door to door. And actually a lot of time going door to door in Mashpee, because in Mashpee you all have, compared to a town like Truro, some nice, really dense neighborhoods. And also, from an age perspective, you have a lot more young working families on the Cape than say in my community in Truro, which I think almost half the population actually is over 65 in Truro. So I spent a lot of time in the doors, really getting to understand this community. I had spent, first was introduced to Mashpee as a child. Actually, we'd make a pilgrimage to the Barnstable County Fair, and we'd always go through Mashpee Commons and stop there. And so, from the conversations I had with people here in Mashpee and across the district and across the Cape, really some key issues emerged. Housing affordability being one that it was very significant, that a lot of people in our community, both young families, really struggling to be able to afford a home here, and older folks wondering if they can hold on to the property that they've had on their fixed incomes. The opiate epidemic, which I think we've brought a lot of attention to, but I think really merits really persistent, continued work. I was talking to Allison Bowser, who's the new head of the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services for the Department of Public Health, and really if you look at opiate overdose leading to death here on Cape Cod, the numbers have effectively plateaued, right? So we haven't meaningfully been getting the decrease I think where we need. We're still losing lives, and we still have many people who are struggling with addiction, and certainly looking at how do we steward this fragile sandspit that we live on. Wastewater is a huge part of that. And that, the real challenge that we have, especially in a community here like Mashpee, where when there were a lot of incentives to build these things cheaply from the state and the federal level, we just weren't that big of communities and weren't sort of a fit for those. So I've been spending a lot of time thinking about how do we find resources to really help our communities realize responsible options for wastewater. yes, sewering, but other options, and particularly looking at how can you, where can we find monies that don't primarily are just based off property tax payers. I think for those of us who live here on the Cape, we feel really fortunate to live here. But for anyone who's spent any time in these communities, they will know that so many of us who live here either are living on fixed incomes and really can't afford these betterments, or like my family, we may be land rich because you bought it a while ago, but certainly are cash poor. So we filed over 27 bills and co-sponsored dozens more to address some of these issues, including on housing. For seniors, we filed an extension of the senior citizen circuit breaker, basically allowing seniors to take off a little more of their property taxes to get a reduction in their overall taxes. Through that, we filed a bill to enable home ownership for first-time homeowners. So for so many folks in the Cape, if you're paying a rent here on the Cape, you're paying the equivalent of a mortgage. And the real hard thing for first-time home buyers here is being able to save up money to afford the down payment. So we're working towards basically creating tax-free savings accounts for first-time home buyers to put away money so they can hope to be able to afford a mortgage. Filed legislation important to the environment and really protecting the fragile aquifer that we have here on the Cape, looking at asking, I see Chairman Gottlieb's arrived.
Carry on.
You missed your, I offered congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
And hopefully it'll keep you busy and also in trouble. So on wastewater and not only just wastewater, but on our fragile environment, how do we ask things like the pesticide, organizations at the state like the pesticide board, to really take a second look and take a harder look at some of our environmental concerns. Filed legislation around a whole litany and list, which I don't want to bore you with. We are now focused on budget season. Dave Vieira is up first, and so we're looking at a pretty tight state budget. The state budget now comes in at about $40 billion. The real kind of challenge we've been having as a state is broadly our economy is doing well. If you're in Greater Boston, it's doing gangbusters. But our taxation revenues just haven't been kind of keeping up with what's expected. My colleague who chairs the Revenue Committee in the Senate sort of describes how we have a 19th century or 20th century taxation system for a 21st century economy. So I think some things we're going to be looking at, extension of the room occupancy tax to include short-term rentals like Airbnb is something I think we expect to take up, hoping that some of that money can be dedicated to wastewater. Also in the budget, looking for continued local aid funding, which is not a lot for our communities, but something continuing to support and continuing to push for, looking at Chapter 70. Though I think the arguments that I've been making to budget writers on Beacon Hill, I sort of get that if you're drafting if you're a budget drafter in one of the Ways and Means committees, you probably have a preconceived notion of sort of what you think our communities are here on the Cape and not actually what our needs are. So working to make that argument. Also been working extensively on looking at Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station, especially making sure that this plant is decommissioned safely and swiftly. Some big concerns around how this plant is decommissioned when it closes in 2019 is really going to have an impact, depending on what route is taken on the safety and security of our community. So this is just sort of my goal, was to introduce myself. Would love to take any questions or comments and things that my team can work on, and then get back to you or get back to Rodney on. Again, I've already had some really great productive work in Mashpee, and looking forward to spending more time here and working with all of you. Questions, concerns, things that are really kind of tough nuts to crack that the community could work on. One thing I did want to mention, I had met with Secretary Jay Ash, who's the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, has been spending a lot of time on the Cape and is aware of sort of the housing challenges we have here, and we're trying to think about how do you take this current state programs and policies we have that often are fits for much bigger cities, and how do you tailor them to the needs of these funny little seasonal communities whose population just swells, for a few weeks out of the year. But one thing that he suggested was that there are a number of grant programs that have been set up at the state level, including the MassWorks program. I know, Rodney, we've talked about this, but really encouraging Cape communities to take advantage of some of these economic development grant programs the state has. They haven't been seeing as many grant applications, and I think actually Mashpee is one of the few towns that actually has received a MassWorks grant in the past. So thank you for applying for that, and my request is, please keep applying. Let us know when those opportunities come up.
Questions from the board?
The only question that comes to mind is you mentioned that looking for tax reductions for senior citizens.
Yep.
On the Cape. How do we offer them where the population is aging rapidly on the Cape? How do we do that and keep the budget working? Are we going to receive grants from the state to offset the loss of tax revenue?
Yep. So this is, so it takes the existing senior citizen circuit breaker tax credit, and it essentially increases the amount that folks can qualify for. And it includes a cap that essentially the tax bill can't be reduced by more than 50%. So it provides some kind of level there. I think that's a good question, especially as our communities are aging. I think, first and foremost, I think continuing to diversify the tax base in communities like Mashpee. Actually, I think Mashpee is a community where there may be some development on the horizon that could actually be far more sort of advantageous to that. I also think from the state's perspective, the longer you help keep people in their home, we know that the longer folks stay in their home, not only the sort of happier they are, but the better health outcomes they have, the healthier they stay, and by keeping folks in their home and out of a facility, the state of you have a government payers who are paying for that. I've got to do a little more work, I think, on the revenue side of what this would actually mean. And actually, we're working to set up a meeting with Commissioner Heffernan, who's the Commissioner of the Department of Revenue. Jake Hoffman, who is a member in the House, who's been a longtime chair of Revenue, is such an expert at these sort of things that he actually teaches a course on this at Northeastern. So I think that's an important piece to look at.
I would agree, and
I don't think it would be terribly significant. I think we're talking about smaller.
right.
Yeah.
And what goes along with that is we're losing our young families. They're leaving the Cape. There's no gainful employment or very little, and they're leaving. So
Yeah.
I don't want to throw the tax burden on the younger families
Yep.
because it'll just give them more
Yeah.
motivation to leave.
I think from a tax burden perspective, the argument that I make, I'm not Pollyannish about sort of the ability or the inability for Dave and I to sort of bring more state resources broadly right to Mashpee. At the end of the day, our communities are going to be seen as the sort of beautiful destination that people enjoy 8 weeks out of the year, and they're going to say, what do you mean you have needs? I think what's important for us is having flexibility to be able to generate our own revenue. Expansion of room occupancy would really make a big difference, and that would not be on the burdens of property owners.
Yeah.
So I think that diversification is actually where I think that sweet spot is. But it's a tricky piece, and especially because the state, again, we have this kind of 19th century revenue system, and so it means that we don't really have the money we should have to be broadly able to support a whole host of things. And so then that ends up burdening you folks at the local level. So I'm all about the more you can do, around flexibility, particularly relying on, I think we have a pretty vibrant tourist economy. How do we rely on that?
Well, we do.
Well, yeah.
Very fortunate, yeah.
Yeah, very fortunate for that.
Rodney, do you have a question?
I just had a follow-up, Senator, to that question. Is this going to be income-driven or age-driven in terms of the modification to any formula?
It's income driven.
It is income-driven.
It's income driven. I can send you folks the bill language. Actually, would be glad to. And I got to refresh myself on actually in the bill. But this is something that actually was filed last session, and it actually made it pretty far. It actually I think made it out of 2 committees. So I think it's something that there's been a lot of folks looking at. And again, how do we support our seniors? I think particularly a place like the Cape. I think we have a real opportunity to really try some innovative things and really help people stay in their homes, have, better outcomes. And that's something I think we're kind of keen to look at, both from a service delivery side, from a town services side. And I think the state really has an interest in providing all that we can to our towns and our communities to help people continue to have vibrant lives, through the course of their lifespan. Not only because it's good for our citizens, but it also makes a heck of a lot of sense when you're looking at a pretty sizable chunk of money going to mass health and other healthcare costs, almost 50% in our state budget.
Good, I'll be in touch. And
Yeah.
thanks for coming, I really do appreciate you.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I will make sure you all have my business card, and look forward to coming here in the fall. Again, I think Dave Vieira and I would love to come together and have a longer conversation just about wants and needs and how we can continue to make Mashpee a better place to live. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just like to say that, I've had the pleasure of working with the center on a couple of issues. Found them to be quick study and, bringing a lot of energy and new perspective to a lot of issues that we've been trying to deal with across the Cape. So it's been great to work with you, and I expect we'll continue to do so. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Before I turn over the hearing to the chairman, the town manager has an announcement to make on our public